Hi everyone. So a little bit about myself first. So my name is Nav. I'm working as a senior mobile engineer at Manulife, Google developer expert for Android, and also a part of GDG Montreal team. So in today's talk, we will go through the announcements that we have at Google I/O related to the Android. So I categorize into different categories. So material design, compose, user security, Android 15, and tooling. So we will go through one by one. So let's start. So first I will start with the material design. Starting with material design version 1.3, we got some new components. The first one is the segmented buttons. So before, if you remember or if you have ever worked with material design in your mobile applications, we have like the old design system which is called M2 or material design 2. But now we are using the M3, which is we also call a material 3. So we got a couple of new variants for the segmented buttons as you see on the screen. And then for if you are developing apps for Android and if you are using Compose, so we also got a new API which is called a pull to refresh. It was there before like a 1.6 version, like from the Material 3, but recently with 1.3 Alpha 06, they like rewrote the API to make things much simpler than before. If you want to use these components like pull to refresh into your applications, although it's at alpha stage, but it's I think pretty solid at this point to use it in production apps. Some of the apps are already using these components. And the next component from material design is the carousel. It's still work in progress. Yeah, I didn't remember the exact version, like since which version this is available, but this is also coming to the Material 3 specifically for Jetpack Compose. So the next thing is the adaptive libraries. So in this case, like if you are developing applications for multi form factors, so like tablets or foldables or things like that, they introduced a new three new libraries like a navigation, suite scaffold, list detail, and the spotting pane. So if you are already familiar with like window size classes that we use to figure out like the application is running on which device, for example, it's a foldable or a tablet. So under the hood, these three libraries basically using the window size class for us as a developers. So they make our life more easier to directly use these components, and they will automatically adjust your application's UI based on the available window. Like for example, this is the screenshot from the navigation suite scaffold. So it will automatically use the bottom nav if the window is compact, which is like mobile, and if it's a tablet, it will use the Navrel, things like that. And the next thing is about the design system. So they also provided, starting with Android 15, there is a option to check if there is a contrast available at the system level. Based on the contrast level, if it's available, you can also customize your color scheme that you can then later on you can use it with your theming in your application. But this is available with starting with Android 15. So in the next section, I will go through the couple of the new APIs that are introduced for specifically for accessibility. So there are two new apps that are for basically for the end users. The first one is called Lookout. So this is for the people, those who have some sort of vision impairment. So it will help them to easily access the content on their phones, or if they want to use any sort of things on their mobile with this app helps them. And then the next one is the Relate. It's basically it's for the speech impairment. If any of the end users, they have any sort of speech impairments, this app helps them to like basically translate or generate live captions, things like that. And starting with Android 15, there are a couple of new libraries or the APIs available for accessibility. So the first one is the container-based navigation. I will show you code in the next slides. This is basically really helpful in case of lists or grids. And then we have a custom collection sizes. Custom collection size is basically helpful when we have like a long list of items, and sometimes we use like the decorative content in our item in the list. So if we are, let's say, showing 10 like the names of the persons, like the contact list, but we also have dividers in there. So accessibility, like the tools like TalkBack, it will show as like 20 items, but actually there are meaningful items are only, let's say, 15. So this API helps us to actually providing the exact amount, like the number of items are available in our list. And then last one is it's not the API, it's basically the feature, maximize high contrast. So when users enable this in their device settings, so for all the text, it will actually added the background color to the text, so it's easily visible or easily accessible for the end users. Yeah, so this is the example of the code. So the first one is for to adding to the container title. It's available only for Android 15. So we initialize the accessibility delegate node for particular view where we want to add it, and then we can say info.container title. So when we enable it, and it's basically, I think in the coming versions, if there is a navigation available for container-based navigation, so then user can skip the long list. Otherwise, like if your screen or your particular activity has a list, it will, like, the user will end up with going through each and every item. But if you set the container title, it will basically help the end user to skip those lists and navigate to the next component. And the next one is for collection size. So as I mentioned, like we have two different counts. Like the first one is set item count. Basically, here we set the total number of items, and then the next important thing is the set important for accessibility item count. So here we provide actually the real number of items that are valuable to the end user. Next, I will go through the updates about the widgets. So we got the API, it's the Compose-based framework called Glance. It's right now stable, it's a 1.1.0, and you can now develop your widgets also totally using Jetpack Compose. You don't need to write XML-based layouts for your Compose. And it has two major components that you need to provide the implementation for. So the Glance app widget receiver, which is basically a receiver specifically for widgets, and then Glance app widget where you provide all the UI for your widgets. So this is basically the sample code for the widget, and then there is a preview. So starting with Cola recent, I think the latest version, we also got a option to actually preview our widget components, like the previews for the widget composables within the Android Studio, so we don't need to rerun every time. Next, I will go through the on-device AI for Android. So the available model for the on-device, it's a Gemini Nano Foundation model, and it's only available from API 14. And it's also available for particular devices. I think right now it's for Pixel 8 Pro and S24 Samsung. We go, as a developers, if we want to consume it or we want to integrate it into our applications, we need to use the Google AI Edge SDK. So for example, this is the screenshot here. Like if Android application, it will use the Google AI Edge SDK to interact with the AI core, and then you can go from there to start interacting with the model and use it in your applications. So next I will go through the couple of app experience related updates. So the first one is edge to edge, starting with Android 15. So as you see in the screenshot, now the by default behavior is edge to edge for all the applications. You might need to test your applications to make sure it doesn't break anything. So now your application is gonna draw the content behind the status bars and the navigation bars. That's starting with Android 15. And the next one is predictive back. It's there since Android 13, but with Android 15, they removed the option of developer. Like before, it was behind the developers options, like the developers flag, but now it's by default enabled. So if your application is supporting these predictive back animations, you will see some sort of these type of animations when user is performing a back gesture on your application. Next is the photo picker. So if your application is having some sort of functionality or use case where you are allowing users to select photos in your application, and you are still using like an old mechanism for asking permissions to access their storage and then accessing photos from there. So in that case, it's the right time to actually move or migrate to the photo picker, which is like a permissionless picker. It's like a system level available. It's available for all the way back to version Android 19, I guess. So you can use this one. So in this case, you don't need any sort of permissions, and you can easily integrate it with your applications. And the last one is the app access risk. I will show you next, like what's that. So for the edge to edge, you just need to call enable edge to edge in each activity of your application. So it will automatically handle the colors for your status bars and the navigation bars, but sometimes you might need to handle it if your application is still XML based, but for Compose based applications, it's pretty much handled by when you calling this method. And for the photo picker, as I mentioned, like there is no runtime permissions, and it also provide access to the cloud photos storages available, for example, Google Photos. And for the predictive back, there are a couple of animations like back to home, like when user is going from activity to back to your home screen. And then there is a cross activities, like if you are going from activity B to the previous activity, and cross task animations are also there. And last one is the app access risk. So there are two ways, like they provided a functionalities capturing, like if there is any app is running and currently capturing anything on the screen, this API, you can use this API to figure out that. And the last one is the controlling, if any app which is running currently on your device and try to control your device. So next I will go through the updates related to the Jetpack Compose. So these are the couple of updates. So the first one is the strong skipping mode. So if you are already using Compose, you might see, or you might have a challenging time to figure out why your composable is recomposing a particular component. So sometimes you need to capture or remember the lambdas in your code to make sure that it's not recomposing. So this is the new feature, which is strong skipping mode. It's right now we need to enable it in our Gradle configuration, but it's gonna be by default on by next release. And the next one is the compiler moves to the Kotlin repository. So right now we as a developers, we need to configure it by ourselves, and we need to make sure every time we need to update the version of Kotlin separately, and then we update the version of compiler. But now things like they make it more simpler than before. So we just need to update the Kotlin version, and compiler is also within that repository. I will show you the next slide, like how we configure it now. The next component is list animations. So with the help of the animate item, starting with the June release of Compose, you can easily integrate the animations to the in your Compose lists. And then there is a shared element transition support is also available, starting with the latest release of Jetpack Compose, as you see in the little GIF at the side. And they also provided a new layouts or the new composables, basically contextual flow, row and column. So instead, if it depends on your use case, if you want to use these components, you can. And then there is a rich content support for the text fields. So now you can also integrate the support for animated content to your text view. So user can basically cut, copy, paste, or basically use the anime keyboard with the text fields for the Compose. The next one is the camera viewfinder Compose. So this is the composable to display the camera preview in your Compose based UIs. Next one is UI check mode. So if you are really care about accessibility of your application, so within the preview windows there is a new option called UI check mode. So when you preview your composable, you just run this mode and it will show you all the errors in your particular preview. Like if there is any color contrast issues, or if there is any touch target size issues are there. I mean, like all sort of accessibility related issues you can easily find within the preview. So it saves a little bit time. Otherwise, you need to run the applications like accessibility scanner to catch these sort of issues. And the next point is accessibility scanner also now supports for Compose. So now if you are testing your application's accessibility using this accessibility scanner, it provides you the detailed information related to the Compose components also. So yeah, this is the example code of like the old way of managing the compiler version for our Android applications. And the new one is basically the upper one. You just define the plugin Compose and just define the ID and the version, and then you don't need this particular specific code for a compiler option or the Compose options for your application, starting with the Kotlin 2.0. So next I will go through the user security. There is a new feature called the Google Play Protect, and now it will recommend the real-time scan for all the applications, and if it finds any sort of issues with the applications, it will automatically provide you the information when you run any particular app. So starting with Android 15, there is a little bit enhancement for the screen sharing. Now we can, as an end user, we can select a particular window or particular application that we want to share instead of like the full content on our screen. But there is a still option, like if you still want to share the entire screen, you can. And then there is at a OS level, there is a private space. So as an end user, we can create a private space if you want to put some your secure like applications like a banking information or things like that. You can create a private space and put your content in there, and you need to provide up like the user log or access to access that information. And the last one is for the explicit intents. So starting with 15, if intent intent needs to match all the parameters if whenever the Android application or any external application wants to interact with any other application. And they introduced a new API called a strict mode for these sort of errors. So during the development, we get the errors like mismatch violations when we test this, so it's easy for developers. And next one is the tooling. So Android team basically changed the way they provide updates to the Android Studio. So now they separate it into two parts. The first one is basically just it's called a platform update. So as you know, it's Android Studio. It's based on IntelliJ IDEA. So whenever there is a platform update from the IntelliJ comes up, so Android Studio, they just do the only specifically for the platform. There is no bug improve, like the no features or no anything new features related to Android Studio comes with platform update. But later they call it like a feature drop. So with that, when that comes, like Android Studio, for example, for Koala, is the feature drop will include all the new features and the bug fixes from the Android team. So starting with the Koala, there are a couple of new features. The first one is the sticky lines. So I don't have demo, but if you as you scroll your content or your long like a file, you will see the methods. It will stick at the top, so you will easily have a reference like where you are actually. And then the breakpoints with the Lambda inlines. So I don't know if it's visible, but as I point like I add the debug point in this particular line, as I'm using a couple of Lambda functions on the list, it highlights all those functions. If I want to debug particular function, I can put the debug option, like that debug only that particular function instead of like the full Lambda. Then there is a new option for emulator windows. Like if you are running multiple emulators in your Android Studio, there is an option actually now split and move, like right or down, so you can easily interact with multiple emulators at the same time instead of switching between one and other. And there is a new way to actually access the Gemini. Now if you want to integrate or use Gemini in Android Studio, it will ask you these configurations. So you can select like if you want to give it access to your contacts, so you will get more information or more help from the Gemini based on your current project. And you can select based on your project per project, or like just give it like a global access, things like that. And you can easily configure these changes. Like if you want to change it later, you can easily by going through the Android Studio settings. Then starting with the Android Koala platform update, which is already stable, we also got the new terminal. It's right now in beta, so you need to enable it. So you will see not just like all the white color, all the information is not just in the white text, but you can see like the colorful information, and it's really helpful to identify what's going on in the terminal. And the next one is the access to the pull request within the IDE. So if you have configured your GitHub with your Android Studio, now you don't need to switch, actually go to the web, like your web browser or any other tool to actually see the pull request. So you can easily access the pull request within the IDE, and you can also approve or add comments to particular pull request from the Android Studio. And K2 compiler is also available right now in alpha, particularly in Android Studio. So if you want to try K2 compiler for Kotlin, you just go to the Kotlin settings and then enable the K2 compiler mode for your projects. The next update is about the connection speed warning. So whenever you connect your device to your Android Studio for testing purposes, and you will see this sort of warning if you're using a duplicate cable or like the quality of the cable is not good. You will see the pop-up warning in Android Studio, like the speed is this, and if you want higher speed, you can switch to the other cable. And the next one is the device settings. So before this functionality, like if we want to test dark theme or any other sort of functionality for our application, we need to actually use the device settings, like go to the device and then change from there. But now, like it doesn't matter if you have connected the emulator or if you have connected the real device. From the device settings, you can change the theme, or you can turn on the talkback. You can change the font size. You can change the screen size from within the IDE. So you don't need to actually go to the device settings. The next one is the profiler redesign. So now with the profiler, you will see a lot more options, and it's particularly like when if you want to select whichever. Otherwise, the older option was like CPU profiler, memory profiler, things like that. But now you will see things like this. So this is the new interface for the profiler Android Studio, and it's in Koala feature drop. So the last part is the AI. So Studio Bot is now called a Gemini. So Android is, if you are looking for Studio Bot, it's now called a Gemini, and you can find it with the Gemini icon in your studio. And this is currently in, I think this is not available yet to try, but this sort of functionality is also coming. It's called transform select mode, and you will see a lot of options. If you want to edit your code and then you want to refine the prompt, like adding a documentation in, for example, in this case, you can refine and tell it to do more. And like in this case, we say add some documentation, and then you can select based on that if you want to accept these changes or not. So I will skip this. I will share the slides, or you can check the developer keynote from IO, and you will find this.
Started. So in front of me, I have a brand new project, and let me open up the Gemini chat window.
This is really actually a cool feature from the, which is coming right now. It's in preview. So you give it like a Figma design screens to the Gemini, and if you have give access to your code base, it will generate the code for you for the design screen. It's like a all composed code. You just give it a design screen.
And let me get this started. Now,
so this is like what they show us in at Google I/O. So we give it the screen, and it will generate all the composed code.
Developers. This allows you to do higher quality multimodal input. Again, what we did here was upload a wireframe of an app and give it a very informative prompt that reads, for the image provided, use Jetpack Compose to build the screen so the Compose preview is as close as possible to this image. And also make sure to include imports and use Material 3. So with all these put together, we get a multimodal response back from the Gemini model. Okay, so here it is. All right, so we have a main activity here. It's using Material 3. All right, so let me just copy that to my clipboard.
I will skip this because of the time constraint, but you can actually watch the full video on the Google I/O playlist.
Let's open up the preview here.
And the last one is the KMM support on the Android side. So if you are developing for cross-platforms, there are support for expanded to the new libraries from Android side for Room and Data Store. So all these libraries are now fully migrated to the KMM support. Yep, thanks for your time.